had before that she's never said out loud. But because he pushed her to it and she's still drunk
And her
/
head
hungover,
hurts.
she is finally
I love
honest.
that she whispers this.
Yes,
'Cause
I
her head is
agree.
throbbing.
I agree.
So it's not
Very
a roar.
restrained.
It is.
But it
it's
does
so pointed.
it does
It's the
seem
mouse
like
that
it
roared.
is coming from the
Her
deepest
viscera.
well of her of generation. Yeah, she's like speaking for her mother and her grandmother
Well, she
and
says
her
what
friends and
women have been doing,
Yes.
have been
Yes.
expected to do. You are doing the
Yes.
bare minimum.
And
she says.
it's really Charlotte's declaration of independence. And she's saying, I am good at this job, which is her arc that
Yeah.
we've been building towards since we started talking in a writing room way before we were in production. Where are we taking Charlotte?
It's such a thrilling completion, and it bookends the speech where she says, Harry says, go be everything.
Right.
But as long as I bring him his everything bagel.
yeah.
And then we go through the terror of, can I do this? And am I skinny
And
enough?
first, no, I can't.
No,
they
I
need
can't.
me too much.
No,
yeah,
it's
and
really
it's-
Charlotte returning to a new Charlotte, which is, a declaration of not interdependence. You're on your own.
Yeah.
Right.
You have to do this because I'm on my own. And it starts, the reason the conversation even starts is because Anthony has stopped by
Right.
and he wants to talk about whether he should lose his ass virginity. Now, that's a case
That's
where
a
off
phrase.
stage is perfectly fine. It is not, you don't need to see it when Harry.
Unless you're a proctologist.
Right.
I
You
mean-
don't want to be on this
When
stage.
Harry says it, it's better than Anthony saying it. Harry saying ass virginity, and then my favorite line, it's a whole willy won't he situation. It's our spin of rom-coms. Because Anthony has come up against literally a wall in that relationship, which is he doesn't get fucked. But the reality is, it's a perfect example of how you have to keep literally balls in the air. Yeah, we're going to give Charlotte her moment, but we also have to keep Anthony's story in the air and give it to Harry and find comedy out of it. So she basically lays down the law, and it's the new Charlotte, and she doesn't have a phone. And that's why she's surprised Anthony is there, because he called her and she doesn't even know where her phone is because she threw it in a pitcher of margaritas the night
I
before.
like picturing Anthony in the kitchen, like poking around, maybe peckish, eating something. I didn't need to see that. I
Or
like
nervous
just
and having
picturing
fiddle
him.
faddle,
Right.
his go-to anxiety food.
a little Ziploc of fiddle faddle that he travels with.
And then just, unloading to the next best thing to Charlotte, which is Harry.
Yeah, and of course,
Over
Charlotte's
coffee.
mother does surface when she says, he didn't say that in front of the children.
Yeah,
Exactly.
right.
But what I do love about this anal virginity story is it's not just about the ass. It is about who he thinks he
Deeper.
is
Yeah.
and his emotional terror of really surrendering.
Yeah.
So it goes, not to get
Yes.
vulgar, a bit deeper.
It does, yeah.
than
And it is part, again, of his arc that we wanted to do. We have Mario Cantone, who is by far such a skilled clown. I mean, and I say that with the ultimate
God.
compliment.
Right.
I mean, if I think someone's a clown, I mean, any joke we write for him, he hits out of the park. Any area that isn't even a joke, he makes a joke. So our goal was to give him something to play to deepen that character, as well as we're deepening Charlotte's. Like, Anthony has to be more than the court jester.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it's not fantastic, but we have a series for a reason
And we'll
to
never
grow people. The next character that we want to check in with is Naya, because her arc this season was, first of all, very vulnerable, not knowing who, I hate to say it, who she was if she wasn't having Cacio Pepe with Andre Rashad. And so even though she's an accomplished scholastic leader, she still is vulnerable on her own. And then we took her through her amusement park of sex and through the pain and the comedy, really, of seeing Andre Rashad do that terrible misstep as inviting her to the baby shower. So we wanted
Thank you,
to,
Samantha Irby.
we wanted
You're
to,
welcome.
it
Oh
was
my
really
God.
important for us to give her another job recognition. And we talked a lot about how that would happen. It's the split personality of the high and the low of all these characters, and the high achievement of Naya being a tenured professor at Columbia. And we wanted to reflect that in view of what we knew we were going to do with her the rest of this episode. So we have Jean, played by the brilliant Andre de Shields,
Broadway legend.
Tony winner, come in as, I guess, her mentor at Columbia. And he's this amazing, weighty, poetic character. And he announces to her that even though he just submitted her to the prestigious American Law Institute, she has been unanimously voted in. And it's great to see Naya thrown and surprised a little bit.
And also, fun fact about Andre de Shields: he is also one of the few actors who has been on Sex and the City in the universe twice, because he played Charlotte's tap dancing instructor in.
Well, that
one
tap
of the
dancing
episodes.
instructor went to law school.
It's a long life.
Look,
He's
there
too
are-
good to just have one.
there are certain actors that you make an exception for. Justin
justify it,
Theroux was
yeah.
on Sex and the
Yeah.
City twice because he was just like, oh, who else is going to be better in that part than him? So when I sat down to write Jean, I was like, well, it has to be someone royal, and it has to be someone black royalty and scholarly and poetic. And I just wrote it really with Andre in mind, and we just said, would you do this? And he came in and he was letter perfect. But what he says that's important is, you're a jewel, and everyone at Columbia knows it, because the only person who doesn't know it in that moment is
her.
Naya, because she's feeling
Alone.
not chosen by her ex-husband.
And it's also the reality of grief, that the
Well,
first time something incredible happens to you, you want to share it.
And I-
Well,
Yeah.
the story
You
point
realize.
being that she says to Miranda, she comes home and says to Miranda, this amazing thing happened, but
The
And
first
I want to go back to what you just said. I don't think it's that she doesn't feel chosen by her ex. She wants that kind of love and connection with someone. I think she knows it wasn't right with Andre Rashad. And this was something we had a big debate about when she comes home and says, you know, my first impulse was to call Andre Rashad, which that part I think we all agreed with.
the
It
idea
was-
being when something wonderful happens to you,
Yeah, you
you
wanna-
instinctively reach for the phone. She admits to Miranda, I had this weird impulse to call somebody who isn't in my life anymore by choice, their choice. And how sad is that? Miranda feels her sadness and does the chess move of reminding her of all her accomplishments, which is what our friends do. Miranda puts that out there, and Naya says, and here's the explosive thought on the table, and no man to share it with. There, I said it. And the idea to me of a strong person who manages deep thoughts as a teacher and legal arguments and complex thinking, to know that she said a thing that it's not cool to say, was the point. And whether we said the thing that was not cool, if she didn't say, there, I said it,
Right.
it would have been awful to me.
Because she wouldn't have been aware of.
The dichotomy.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
and we've gone against the trope of the lonely divorced woman sitting at home eating Haagen-Dazs
Isn't
for
that
night
the
on edge.
most naked moment, though?
It is the most
to
naked
reveal
moment.
that to somebody.
Absolutely. And it's a beautiful moment, and then it's a real moment, because however well you're doing, there is that sorrow.
And it's not saying that you need a man to share your life. It's saying that Naya felt the gap of her achievement versus her.
Personal fulfillment.
Which is the
yeah.
reality for so many accomplished women of every color, that they are on their own. And there's a sadness there sometimes.
And she's also, it's also just a moment.
Yeah.
Literally, it's just a moment. Because all she says is next is, I'm not going to the dinner. I don't feel like seeing people tonight.
Yeah.
I just got the sense I've acknowledged this emotional wound. I'm going to realign myself to know this isn't my identity, but I think the most healthy thing is that she acknowledges it.
Yeah.
And then Miranda, always tenacious and quite frankly, smart as fuck, says, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing is, every time anyone's seen this episode, the next sentence Cynthia says, which is not a laugh line, always gets a laugh. I understand, but can I just say? And the thing she says is Michelin chef.
And there's something very nurturing about that moment. And like affirming, nurturing, I'm with you, you're coming. I don't know.
It's also the best of Miranda, because it's the Miranda, come on, we're going to pick ourselves up, we're going to dust ourselves off.
And then the best of Naya goes, yeah. And then you'll have a wingman for Che. It's like, I see you and I raise you wingman for Che. But she does break through, and she changes the sadness to sarcasm, which is, I mean, come on, you can't ask for more than that. Sadness to sarcasm.
Yeah,
for
it's
certain
vintage
people.
Miranda.
And the reason Cynthia's Miranda is so, I think, zen and centered in this conversation, she's just sitting in that chair reflecting, is because she's just come from a reunion with Steve. And the Steve Miranda reunion has been in our hearts and souls.
We knew we
since,
were writing to this.
Since we were having trouble with them, we were like, what do we do for Steve? And we knew that he was at Coney Island, and we knew that Miranda had a little bit of a disconnect when Carrie knew that he was there. And Carrie calls her out and says, you know, you can go. And she's dragging some baggage about how she ends relationships. So right after Charlotte wakes up in that fog of her, we cut to this bright sunny day, and it's the most idyllic day in Coney Island, and you see Miranda surprise Steve. And he is surprised. And what do we want out of this scene,
I think
Elisa?
I think what we wanted was justice for Steve. Just kidding. We wanted
Well,
closure.
we didn't achieve it.
We wanted closure. I think we wanted closure. That thing that everybody always talks about. But we wanted peace.
It's what's the opposite of closure? Opener? Because it's like
Growth, a new beginning, hope
a new beginning.
for.
That's what we wanted.
I think in my mind, they're family to each other. They still love each other on some level. They created this person together who they both love deeply, and they, you know, as you wrote so beautifully, they built a life that made sense for a long time. And
we were right for a very long
Yeah.
time is such a moving line.
And I
it's
wish-
so
yeah.
redemptive because it wasn't all a disaster.
There's also a
Yes.
line in here that is so emotional to me, who have written Steve since day one. And first of all, I'll get to that line in a minute, but the first part of the scene is Steve sort of acknowledging that he's had a rough couple of years, and that being with Miranda is like being on the roller coaster over there. He's surprised his head's not smashed on the pavement. And that's important that she owned that.
Hear his side.
And you know, the olive branch is so tiny. When Miranda doesn't know what he's talking about, the head on the pavement, he said that happened to a prom kid once. And then she says, well, I never went to my prom because of that, but mostly because no one asked me. And he says, what's wrong with those knuckleheads?
Yeah.
And that's
He's
the olive
still-
branch.
yes.
And then they literally turn away from the roller coaster and they're looking out at the horizon. And the line that I love, that I felt important, and I'm getting emotional just to say it because it's very subtle. She says, you were always smart. Because in my mind, Steve always felt
He wasn't smart enough
Wasn't
for her.
smart. Wasn't
Yeah.
smart enough
Ivy
for her.
educated. And
Yeah.
Yes.
I really think that it's deeply in him that she was the smart one and he wasn't about everything. And I had Miranda tell him, you were always the smart one about certain things. And for me, emotionally, because it's still really emotional, it's ridiculous how emotional I'm getting.
It's a long
I
time.
care
you've
so
been
much
with these
about
characters.
David and Steve. And that combination of, I guess you would say, intellectual high-low, and that he winds up being that thing that I think most couples get, and I certainly get from Craig, my partner, is that smartness of what they know that's smart that you don't have a clue about.
And the different
And as survival, I think we all have people in our lives that have a different series of smarts. And depending on who you're talking to, you seem like the smart one. But then they're really the smart one about other things.
100% agree with you. And I think that is a wisdom. That is aging, is learning that there are so many kinds of intelligence in the world. She wouldn't have been able to say that to him as even a 40-year-old woman.
Right.
She wouldn't be able to see that. But that is the intelligence that I think that you can get as you get older, is just like the broader view of
Emotional
the world.
IQ.
And also what's important, not being the first female at Harvard to be picked.
Right.
But now it's about
life.
You knew to pick a house in Brooklyn when no one was in Brooklyn.
Well, and that he didn't care about what was fashionable.
Right.
That his values were always so pure. And I love his saying, "What's wrong with those numbskulls?" Because it reminds one he's always found her beautiful. He's always found her splendid. She's always been his prom queen. And he's still giving her that.
Yeah, and we love Steve. Don't we love Steve?
I mean,
So much so that half the audience hated the show because of what we did to Steve the first season. But
even that was with love.
I mean, there were when we did the Miranda telling Steve that she's gonna. He says, "Are you asking if you want a divorce? You asking me for a divorce?" Season 1, the crew had on pins that was either Steve's face
Team
or
Steve.
Miranda's face, and Cynthia had on a Steve pin. I had on Miranda, and then on my inside I had Steve. But I love the thing that she says, "I'd like to be there in your life if you let me," and he actually calls it out, but just as friends, because I don't want that other thing anymore.
And that's healthy growth for him, a man who declared to Carrie, "I'm never taking my wedding ring off."
Yeah, he has come to the point where he's like, I don't need to believe. I mean, it's this working class version of I don't need to participate in those old mores of I married you till death do my part. He's like, I don't want to put myself through that roller coaster anymore. They're done.
The poetic period on this moment is Brady.
Right.
Pausing to see them and the huge relief on his face, and without any words. I mean, that's beautiful writing of the stage direction and directing, that he knows his parents are okay and he's okay now.
I think as a viewer, that is what I would be thinking about the most, is I hope they get to a good place for Brady's sake. That was important to me, that they're like back on good terms, because they have this kid to be responsible for until, he's 30. No one moves out anymore. No one gets off the tip.
Oh my God.
They will be collaborate.
Well,
I love that.
We had so much fun collaborating on all these characters, and now we're at the moment where the most decadent thing of all happens. We're going to see every character that's been on the show, minus the children, because it's a dinner party and Julie and Lisa wouldn't let me bring them. No, that's not true. I didn't want the kids either on this one. This is the one time I was like, no kids, please.
It would have been awful if those kids were there.
The adult dinner party thrown by Carrie Bradshaw, who we all know is the center of the entire thing, is now sitting at the head of this table for 16 people. And the apartment, the discussion about the apartment, and the thrill of that big, long table, and what would Carrie Bradshaw put that? Karen Weisel Holmes, who was our set decorator.
Lost many nights of sleep prepping for this scene.
I mean, they were like, that's it. what are the flowers? I mean, coming in that to work out through this thing.
It was a tapestry.
The first moment, and it's kind of the last time we've seen LTW was in the bedroom at dawn when she had miscarried, and she says to Herbert, he says, let's go to the hospital. And she says, okay, but I think it's too late. And then here she is, standing tall,
Looking
gorgeous. And Chris Jackson as Herbert, done, perfect suit, perfect tie, as always, talking to Carrie, holding martinis. So that's our little nod to let the audience know
The baby's
she's
gone.
drinking, the baby's gone. And then Charlotte shows up and says to Carrie, oh my God, it's so beautiful. Do you remember when we used to eat cold noodles out of boxes in here? And Carrie says, yes, I do. Anyway, so the first thing is that Charlotte notices the martini
Right.
and says, you're drinking? And LTW, Nicole Ari Parker, with the subtle everything, shoots a look to her that tells her, don't talk about the baby. And she goes, oh, I'm not supposed to know. And then he says, we lost it. And she says, I miscarried. And Charlotte starts to react. And LTW says,
Not here.
not here. The appropriateness of not turning somebody's party
Into your sob fest.
or even your moment. She won't even let Charlotte have a moment because
Well,
that's
and I think she doesn't want to. She knows she'll
If she
probably
opens
break
that
down.
door,
Yes.
it's a very boundary person.
yeah. So you get the sense, that she's pulled it together for tonight, and she's kind of holding it together.
Yep.
And then Harry walks in, and his acknowledgement about Charlotte's whole Declaration of Independence is, "I'm going to keep doing this." He brings her the newest, most powerful phone he can because she lost her other phone, and it's his way of saying, "Do it." Be
you.
powerful,
Go,
be
do
current.
you.
Here's your
Yeah,
phone.
I'm with you.
I get it.
I have your back.
I'm supporting you. I'm giving you the
I'm
the
going to stop
tool you
complaining.
I ran the errand.
Well, at least I'm giving you a phone.
Tonight.
Tonight, exactly.
It's such a satisfying moment because that is the push and pull in a marriage, especially when the power dynamic is shifting. And just that, it's one of the most romantic moments in television, I have to tell you, for those of us who've been married a long time.
It's a grand gesture. And then you cut to Carrie going downstairs. And here's where you really see the dress. Float, 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 float. And it's Anthony and Giuseppe. And they start up the stairs. And Anthony says, stop looking at my ass. It's not on the menu. So you understand, still no movement.
Resolution.
No movement in that storyline. So the next time you see them, they're talking, and it's a group talking, and LTW saying she loves Italy, she loves Rome, and Giuseppe announces that he's going to be returning.
To Italy because it's too difficult to penetrate.
I believe the word
New
is
York.
impenetrable. Yeah, the publishing industry.
And Charlotte, ever still Charlotte, even though she's the new Charlotte, she says, but you're coming back, because she's trying to keep the happy.
Yes,
Couple.
the happy ending.
Yeah.
They're her
And he
couple
goes,
after
I
all.
don't know. And Anthony is thrown. And then later in the closet, which they're not in the closet, but later in the closet, he says, I won't let you fuck me and you're leaving the country. And Giuseppe says, it's not about that wall, it's about all your walls. And at that point, Lisette pops out of the bathroom, and I swear to God, she's like Tinkerbell through the show. It's like, Katerina Tannenbaum plays Lisette, and I just love her so much. And I said to her, "Come out of the bathroom, run through just interrupt this scene, and notice that Carrie left you the old bras she talked about from the '80s." So it interrupts them, and basically Giuseppe says, "I told you." You don't let me in. And Anthony cracks. He says, I have walls up. It's my problem. He's referencing the Stanford relationship.
And also the only time I've ever been in love, I called all the shots, which is it's a self-aware thing of him to
Yeah.
say.
And
Yeah.
you know that Anthony called all the shots with Stanford, and Stanford
That was no
fine.
secret.
And then at that moment, that scene's interrupted by Carrie introducing
Her kitty.
her kitty to her family.
Hello, kitty.
And the cat's name is Shoe, which is
Well-
cute. And what this moment is about is, aside from the fact that Carrie's introducing her new family to her current family, is LTW hearing the word, put my baby to bed. I got to go put my baby to bed. And what she's been holding starts to come up, and she excuses herself and goes through the closet where the boys have made up and are now making out and goes into the bathroom. And then they start making out again. And at one point I said to them, they were making out through the whole thing. I go, you wouldn't do that in real life. You'd only do that in a show.
Yeah,
I said, when somebody comes in, stop making out.
Come out of the 90s sitcom that you're doing now.
Gay guys aren't that safe in the world, even though, somebody comes in, you reflectively stop making out. Just for
I would hope that heterosexual people would also stop.
I can't speak for them since I'm no longer one. Anyway, the point is, then Herbert interrupts and they stop and goes in. And here's what I love about the Herbert LTW scene in the bathroom. I didn't tell her what to do. She sat down on that tub. And then I was so moved. It's like when Carrie drank the whole Cosmo in the episode before.
That
I did not picture that.
scene. How
and
did you
that's the
picture
joy.
it?
Somewhere in the bathroom. I actually did.
Standing.
I knew
You
they were
thought
in the
they'd be
bathroom and I thought
standing?
they were standing. It's there. But it wasn't even a physical decision she made. It was an emotional thing she was playing. The minute I saw her sit down on that, what used to be a rented apartment, low bathroom. We never really redid Carrie's bathroom from back in the day. And then Chris Jackson sat down there with her. I was like, I never imagined that. And then when they were in the clothing, that high level, those exalted, high-end characters sitting down in Carrie Bradshaw's slum of a tub from back in the day. I was so moved. And, when that happens, sometimes you're just like, I wish it was a play. So I don't have to ask them to do it again and again and again and again, because you go in and you shoot it and there's coverage. But boy, they were amazing. Amazing and soft and knowledgeable.
And I feel like Herbert does what only he could do in that moment, which is to both let her say the thing, the scary, awful thing she says.
Did I wish the baby away?
You didn't wish anything away. Don't you even think like that? Get that thought out of your beautiful head.
I just feel so guilty about everything I said.
You have feelings. We both have feelings. I was thrown too, but Lisa, thoughts are only thoughts. And there's nothing to feel guilty about. It wasn't meant to be. It wasn't meant to be. And God has other plans for us.
This speaks to the specificity of this African-American couple, which is something, again, we don't see very often portrayed on film or on television. And it's a very moving moment. It shows the depth of their love and the depth of their bond. And we lightly touch on the fact that this is a man of faith, which is also often culturally accurate, not always.
Yeah, and the thing I love most about the scene at the end, after this beautiful thing, he says, do you want to go home? And she says, no, the table is so pretty. I mean, come on. The idea that she's going to lift
The
herself
grace
up
of that.
and be aesthetic and like, I'll look at the flowers and feel good.
But that harkens back to the kind of emotional discipline that Herbert didn't display in the cab episode and that his mother was reminding him of, that there is this stoicism and there is this Blackness oblige, if you will, and this dignity, and it's not all about us. Our hostess has made an effort, and we're going to move forward.
And that she recognizes beauty.
Yes.
And it's important. It fuels her and makes her happy. And they decide to go to the dinner. And meanwhile, while this is happening inside, Che is meeting Lisette outside. They enter the party, first of all, good friend, also comes solo, very strong character, I think. Shows up, sees Lisette. Lisette is starstruck, which is fun. That, someone
Is geeked out.
like, and the dialogue is so awkward. Like, and Lisette, Katerina plays like, do you have any new comedy thing coming? Like, it's like a jewelry designer talking to a stand-up about show business and doesn't even have the words. And Che's given her the kind of like, yeah, hi, I'm polite. And then Che goes, look, it's the thing Julie was talking about.
Yeah,
Julie.
it felt to me very real that that moment when you are talking to a stranger
Friend
at
of
a
a friend.
party. Yes, it's like, how honest am I going to be? And then Che's like, fuck it, I'm never going to see you again anymore.
Yeah, I mean, and I like that about Che. They call it out and make this like, I'm going for broke here. And they say they're emotionally transitioning. The old me isn't here, is done. Doesn't work, and the new me isn't here yet, which is a very big journey.
And we had a lot of conversations about what would the quote unquote happy ending look like for Che?
Because we thought, do we have to give them a
neat,
full
happy ending.
And every time we tried to tie them up, it felt awful.
Yeah.
Because
true.
even Sada
Yeah.
was talking to me earlier when we were figuring out, like, what are we going to do? And I was like, I feel like it's something that's unfinished in a great way. It's like somebody acknowledging I'm in transition
Yeah.
emotionally
Yeah.
and being wise. And otherwise, like happy endings, no. The most we can achieve is acknowledgement, like Naya did. Look what I just said about myself. I'm aware that it doesn't work. Che's going, what I was doesn't work. What I am isn't here yet. And that's the most we could do,
And
everybody.
I'm okay being
and
in
we
this
like it.
stage
It's-
of limbo.
And then, and then, of course, it's interrupted by the reunion of Jackie and
Oh
Che.
my God.
And, after that, in walks downstairs Naya and Miranda. And Naya enters the party saying, don't leave me. I got your back, you got mine. And here is our biggest stunt of this season. You think Samantha was the hard stunt? No. What we wanted to do was introduce a character in the very first episode for Naya, have him
Not
disappear,
see him again.
not see him,
for
but
the
we
next
knew he was
10
going to show up when
Somewhere.
at the end.
When she least expected it.
Toussaint, who was in a restaurant earlier and talked about her purse being
a rampart.
a rampart, shows up out of the downstairs apartment as the Michelin chef, and Naya's gobsmacked.
And,
Because he's
and
beautiful.
I have to say,
Hubba.
if I didn't live in New York City, Brooklyn specifically, I would think like, oh, how convenient. It happens all the time in New York. Like you will not see
true.
someone for years on end and then see them twice.
Exactly. Your paths start
It's
to
like
cross. And
a-
he's also an
Well, that's-
avatar for a whole new wave of celebrity chefs of color, like Marcus Samuelson and Kwame Onwuachi. And he's just this beautiful, multicultural man.
And what's really not common is to get Gary, that amazing actor, to say, I'll do one and then I'll come back at the end. I mean, we had to say, Gary, it's important. It seems like it's one
Not just
scene,
one scene.
but it's not. It's the end of an arc that we've been building for 11 episodes. And he's like, all right, let's do it. And he's one of a kind. And so, of course, Naya's thrown.
And we wanted to give her a victory, not just professionally, which we also wanted to do, but it's like she
She earned that.
Yeah, we wanted to give
It's
her
like a present.
I guess, chef's kiss, if I will, of a happy ending. So Miranda goes upstairs, and there is Che. So now this moment is, what are we going to do with this moment?
Well, and Samantha, we have to get your thoughts on the poetry of it. This discussion happening
in
About
the
that-
at the
kitchen,
scene of the
fingering.
erotic crime.
Yes,
famous
it,
fingering.
it is the scene of the crime. It is where Che's doing shots with the bartender, which I love, by the way. And then Miranda walks in and sees them and charges ahead. Doesn't even hesitate, taps
Yeah.
Che on the shoulder. Che turns around, doesn't know what it is, almost
So
chokes
it's
on
like
the
a
lime
double
wedge.
shake.
And then Miranda says, hi, we can't ruin Carrie's party. Like aggressive.
Yeah.
Hi, we can't ruin Carrie's
And
party.
take charge.
But
of
just
it.
getting
It's
to
the
the point.
Miranda
And- yeah.
we always knew.
And this is also thanks to Carrie telling her, "You're
You
coming
have to
this."
come. You
Yeah.
can't
Be a
avoid it.
grown-up.
So be a grown up. You're not. You're
So she put her
alive.
big girl pants
Because
on.
people are not alive in Carrie's life, and you're alive and you're coming. And so Che immediately apologizes on purpose. We wanted Che to
Yeah.
feel what they did in the stand-up club, and says, if I'd known you were there, I would have never done those jokes.
And then Miranda
But they
says
were
the
funny,
real
right?
thing, like the real hurt was like, did you actually feel that way?
She asks Che, what were we? And Che says, Miranda, we were a train wreck. Because they were.
And the entire viewing audience exhales.
Everyone exhales but Miranda, who wants to make this something
Right.
that needed to happen. And Cynthia's portrayal, and she asked me, like, why is Miranda saying this? And I said, Miranda's saying, I didn't go through all of this to be, you know, dead on the side of a train wreck. You know, she wants, and for
It's
us,
to be for something,
for
not for
something.
nothing, right?
And so she says, but we were like a good train
Good
wreck.
train wreck. Yeah, I love that.
Well, and the
She's
beautiful line
reaching.
about it takes you where you need to someplace that you needed to go. And that is true of certain relationships.
And no other train could get you
Get
there.
you there.
And
It's
that's
shut.
the truth.
Yeah.
No other train but Che could have gotten Miranda out of that dead file that she was living in, which was unrealized career-wise, unrealized marriage-wise,
unrealized sexually.
and unrealized personally. Like her identity was unrealized. She had lost herself. And then Carrie spins by and checks in on her two friends. Everything okay? Great hostess. Not going to get down in any sad moment with you.
right.
Just, is there any triage that needs to happen?
Checking in.
But I'm a hostess. I got to move. Give me a shout out if you need a flare, but goodbye. And then in walk Seema and Ravi. Now, the idea of Seema being with a man that she said she loves so quickly for Seema's book. I mean, you can meet somebody and in 2 days say I love you, and it's accurate. But Seema does not allow that. She don't play that. So now she's with Ravi and is pulling away. And Carrie gets stuck talking to them or talking at them because Seema's on an island by herself.
They're just shut
and
down.
Ravi's just watching Carrie go on and on about this new painting. And she's looking at Seema like, are you going to join me? And, you know,
Or
that
am I
thing.
doing this fan dance on my own?
That thing where you're suddenly in a deep TED talk with your
Self.
best friend's person who you don't even know. And then Seema's just sipping her drink and looking in the kitchen for no reason. And then Ravi gets a phone call and from the studio because his movie's in some sort of flux. And Carrie calls Seema out and says, you've got to add something to this conversation.
You're not
and
a temp.
Seema says, I'm not going to put any more into this. I said I love you too soon. The last time I did this was when I was a temp in 1990, and I slept with the junior partner, and then they let me go because I was saying I was a temp. And Carrie goes, you were.
a temp.
And Carrie tells her, you're afraid. This is tough love.
And it's sort of like finally they've had a number of moments where Seema has basically held up a mirror to Carrie and said, you've had love. So now I feel like Carrie is actually witnessing what is possibly a pattern for Seema, which is like, here's a guy who appears to be completely into you and you're pushing him away.
And she says, I think you may be afraid it's the thing you've been waiting for. Now, we don't even know if we're
Yeah.
on board with Seema's relationship, but we know that Seema's behaving in a fearful way, which tells Carrie, breathe, she says to her, breathe.
And then that very moving line, you're not a temp. And Seema's reaction to that speaks volumes.
She takes the advice, and she gets another drink, and then in the middle of the dinner scene, she goes down after Toussaint has introduced everybody to exploding molecular olives. Yes, I did the research, and by the way,
You've been to the
Everything
dinner
is real.
parties.
spoiler alert. How many calls we made molecular olives, and they're perfect. They're done. They're made with olive essence and oil, and they hold together on a spoon and explode in your mouth, just for the joke where Naya says to Toussaint, very eye to eye, "Ooh, that exploded in my mouth. I wasn't expecting that." Yes, we're still born of the Sex and the City world. We're doing exploding man things in her mouth. But the next day, after I think we did the olives all in one day, all the actors started going, "Did you have a little problem when you went home? Did you have a little problem when you went home?
Wait,
Did you?"
seriously?
Yeah, there was a lot of.
So they're a wonderful laxative?
They're
Olive?
a lot of the olive
Hysterical.
oil, the oil,
Oh,
the
the
content.
oil.
And because in the
Who
show,
knew?
folks, spoiler alert, it's not really happening. They had to eat a lot of molecular olives. Now, and there was
You're
just
supposed to have one or two.
I'm learning.
yeah, but
Not
and
a jar.
and Carrie Bradshaw, by the way, is game. As she says to Che, "Should we just dive in?" And they just start eating these molecular olives. And it's like Kristen was like, "I didn't eat any." Kristen was the only one. Fake. She mimed eating. Ooh, she
Smart.
just didn't eat
You're
them. I'm just
allowed.
saying, everybody who didn't have olives didn't
have a problem.
Anyway, here's the point. The point is, Ravi excuses himself during the olives and goes downstairs, and Seema comes out and says, "You've been down here since the appetizers, as the main courses are going up." Now, this scene is important, and this was a scene that was changed on the day. Because the idea is that she's calling him out. His plot point is that now he has to leave New York because of, the movie director in me knows, there's a sudden shift and they can only get the Great Sphinx, and he has to leave, and she takes it as fuel to fuel her red
Right.
flagness,
She's like, aha!
that you're dumping me because I said I love you. So the first person who came to me was, I think, the ambassador from Susan Fails Hillville, who said to me, "It's time for him to say something back."
Yeah.
What did you want in the show
This
that
is a
wasn't
great
there?
spiel.
I wanted him to say, "Stop it. This is an insult to us and to me. I have given you no reason. I am here. Stop acting like a child," basically, in a more loving way.
Right.
And
not,
to really
not just to disabuse her, not just to say, "No, it's not true," but like, you're actually insulting me.
And, Seema, played by, of course, Sarita, just literally blanches, and it stops her in her tracks.
Yep.
And that was very important. And you said it's the only way we can continue. And what it's on brand about this, which is very Sex and the City, is occasionally the male characters put a spotlight on the fact that it's not them, it's you.
Yeah.
And that's what stops us from being a soapbox show where everybody goes, women are this and men are that,
Right.
and I'm being and you're
Right.
the man.
Yeah.
and
Men are
you're-
bad.
Men are bad. It's like you're creating a problem, and I'm with
Yeah.
my words telling you that.
Right.
And the other thing was, the scene that's coming up is really the most important development in the writing room, which is the scene where they all go around the table and release one thing that they no longer want. And I thought, and this is a problem-solving moment. I knew that this was a problem because I had 16 characters around a table, and I knew that's an impossibility. What the hell are they going to talk about? And what's the page count? And how do you shoot it? And so I actually was like, well, what is this scene about? And I really didn't know. And I put the pencil on the paper, and all of a sudden it came into my mind. Carrie comes up with a game that they have to go around the table, say one word, and release everything. And in 2 minutes, I went to the computer and wrote each of their words and where they were sitting around the table and who was saying what to what. And it was the least effort in the entire show. And it was, because that's when I think it's not from you. It's from, I don't
It's
know, your higher
it's
self or
alchemy.
somewhere.
Yeah.
It's in the world. You're like a little, to be very ooky, spooky, spiritual about it. You're the open vessel that suddenly gets this help. And all of a sudden I was like, hey, it's poetic. B, Carrie's hosting a party, and this is a fun thing you would do at a party. C, it's one word. And in that one word, they can each resonate their season or their current moment. For example, LTW gives away guilt. And the rule is if somebody says your word, you have to pick a new word. And right before LTW gives away guilt, Miranda says guilt. And then LTW goes, oh, sugar. That's her word, by the way. That's
Nicole's
Nicole
word.
Ari Parker. Instead of saying shit,
Sugar.
she says sugar. She goes, oh, that was my word. And then she thinks about a new word. And she looks down the table after knowing what she just had, that scene in the bathroom where he said, you have nothing to be guilty about. She looks at Carrie Bradshaw, who, by the way, Sarah Jessica, another actor choice, decided to stand. And I never imagined that. She literally stood at the head of that table and held the energy for everybody. And she looks at Carrie standing there and says, sorry, Carrie, it's guilt. Carrie looks back at her and nods, it's okay. And then the next thing, which is the best part of it all, is hedge fund, Brooks brother,
Yeah.
fully
Always
realized
knows
man
what to say.
is so overcome with emotion, he can't play it. And he says, you're going to have to come back to me. But that was the fun. And it was the surprise. And you reading it going, what's this? And I go, I know, like it's a gift we give each other every now and then, how we interpret these ideas. And then Carrie gives this speech, which is just about letting go of expectations. And in some way, it's a voiceover from Sex and the City, but really happening the way Carrie speaks. So you say, oh, that's how she writes, but this is how she speaks. And she says, I'm giving away expectations.
Expectations. And to be clear, I'm not talking about having dreams or wanting something to happen. It's so important. I'm talking about, assuming things will go the way we think they should for whatever reason, because you never know what tomorrow will bring. And it might be greater than anything you ever expected.
Carrie, that was way more than one word.
And Michael Birnbaum, who is the editor extraordinaire that I've worked with on the series and on the movies, surprised me. Here's where I was surprised by choosing who to cut to hear what Carrie's saying. And it was so interesting. He cut to Seema. He cut to Giuseppe, people that I wouldn't have expected. And all of a sudden, he's telling me now what the show is. I mean, it's just surprising how much collaboration goes into, here's your idea. Then the editor takes it and goes, I see you. But what if Naya, you cut to Naya on a word and how that would affect the audience? So he's a genius. And then you get out of that scene and it's just Charlotte and Harry and Carrie having dessert. And then Miranda comes out of the bathroom and her storyline goes to someplace we really were sure was going to happen, which is Human Rights Watch Raina just got a call, something's happening. Somebody from Human Rights Watch has to go on the BBC.
And
she
this
can't
was
because she left her baby.
And we love this as a way to end Miranda's journey of finding herself, getting back to work, doing something.
Yeah, we
she
always felt so
is good at.
bad that Miranda had left her job and still hadn't realized this goal, which she says in the first episode of In
This
Just Like
great
That,
potential.
season 1, is I want to do more in the world. I was sick of just wearing a pink pussy hat. I needed to do more. I needed to talk
Contribute.
about people and
Yeah.
humanitarian and go someplace
Make a
where it matters. Make a
difference
difference
in someone's life.
We wanted her to have a success, and we
A real
wanted
victory.
to say,
Yeah.
I'm Miranda Hobbs,
Yes.
and I'm speaking for the Human Rights Watch. So in order to do that, it feels very broadcast news in a compliment to the James L. Brooks kind of like suddenly somebody's thrust on camera. And
Which
so
actually happened.
She flies out of there, and she gets a cab that has the Museum of Sex, wink, wink, get it, because we're a sex, and that's Museum of Sex. And then she goes, and she's met by Joy, and that's played
By Dolly Wells.
Dolly Wells,
The
who
fabulous.
is the fabulous actress, the fabulous writer. And Dolly said she would play Joy, who is the BBC rep who Miranda met at the UN. And they sit down, and Joy is taking her purse and says, "Here we go. Are you ready? You'll do fine. And afterwards, we'll go for a drink." And Miranda says, "I don't drink." And Joy says, "You might."
You might.
You know, that irreverent
British humor.
British humor. And then the most important thing that happens right before they go on, Miranda does what?
Looks at her initials, which was a way to.
Her tattoo.
Her tattoo,
Initial.
a callback to episode 3,
And
which
it's-
is really
Chapter 3.
Her reclaiming of herself.
Exactly.
And she says she wants to do something that reminds her not to slip back. And there she is, pulling strength from her own name. And she goes on TV and says that.
Yep.
And while Cynthia is playing Miranda, who's doing very well, and you can see Joy nodding, "You're killing it," we cut to Seema and Ravi home, and he has a fix to her problem that they're going to be separated. "You'll go with me to Cairo for 5 months." And here this smart, successful woman says, "I'm not giving up everything I've worked so hard with for a man, full stop."
We circle this a lot, right? Like back to Carrie and Petrovsky in Paris, and and Miranda and Che in LA. So yeah, I mean, there's a case to be made, but I think, I don't think any of us really imagined Seema picking up. I mean,
it's just there that he says, "So now what?" And she says, "I'm afraid to." And he says, "I'm coming back, because you made me sign, I love you, and you made me sign that ironclad lease on the apartment." Right. That's the joke that gets her to laugh. So, and now we come back to Carrie and her new best friend, the kitten. And she's doing the post conversation about the party, and she hears a tick, tick, tick on the window.
I'm sort of dreading this conversation even.
And she looks out the window, and there is Aiden throwing a rock up at the window, much like she threw a rock up at his window in Sex and the City when she visited him at night after his second return. And she says, "Come on up." And he says, "I was working the buzzer." That's writing justification. And Carrie says it broke because of so many activity tonight. And he walks into the apartment, and then she realizes what?
That he's broken
in
his
the
own
apart-
rule, that he's actually there, and this can't be a good sign. I mean,
And he has such a state of calm and presence. I felt like when he walks in there, he doesn't appear nervous. I feel like he's resolute.
And he pulls up a chair and says, "Come here."
Sit down. Oh.
And she also notices he doesn't have luggage. That's the first shoe that drops. The plot point is simply that Aiden believes now that bad things happen if he's not there. He admits to her that he's really the home for these 3 boys. And that's who he's always been. And that this kid, Wyatt, had psilocybin in his system. He had been on mushrooms and drunk. And that was important, too, because Samantha's like, drunk is not enough. It has to go.
Or
It has
stoned.
to
I
go.
remember you didn't
It
want
has
him
to
just
be complicated.
Yeah, the kids don't get drunk now.
I mean, the reality is
inhale.
also that we are now building the case for what becomes the plot of what we decided to do the entire second season, which is we're bringing Aiden back. She's not going to hurt him because she knows she can't. And we also don't want the fans to think we did that again. So he's going to hurt her. And the only way we knew that he would ever pull away from her is if the bigger love, and every parent would assume that this is a bigger love, is the responsibility and your love for your children. So he says to her, and this will be the debatable point.
I was going to say this is
Can you
certainly
give me
debatable.
time until they're out of their teens? To Wyatt's out of his teens, not all of them, but they all need me. And she goes, "That's 6 years," and then he desperately says, "It's 5. His birthday's next week." So the question is, what is happening right now?
Well, we also gave the audience some new information, which is that he really is the primary parent. And that is certainly not a traditional thing.
Or
for a man.
he feels that he is.
Yeah, and she's definitely trying to work. Of course, you be there as long as you need to be. And he goes, no, I can't keep doing what we're doing. That's the first horror
Right.
movie. And the second one is she's like, well, I'll come down to you. And he says, no, because I'll only be thinking of you if you're there. And she says, are you never even going to think of me? And he says, I think about nothing but you. So that's the most he can give
Snapping
her.
of the fingers.
And then he
yeah.
snaps and says, it's only 5 years, and we haven't seen each other in 10 years, and it went by like that in 5 years. And he doesn't snap, he says, because I already did, but you didn't see it, that's how quick it was. And she blows out the candle. And as the smoke of their relationship rises, literally, and that was not intended, when she blew out that candle, it was like the most visual special effects that really wasn't a special effect. She says, I thought I'd given up. And he says, given up what? She says, expectations, which is the thing she had talked about everybody giving up at the dinner. So we have this complicated thing happening now. We go into a montage where Michael Bierenbaum beautifully edited it. And it's this beautiful song called Golden Hour. And it's where everybody is. And we see that Charlotte and Harry are doing the very commonplace thing of trying to be in a bed and start their phone. And
iPhone working.
yeah,
New iPhone.
and then
Program it.
Charlotte says, should we get rock? And he says, no, we can do this together. So that's their story. Then we see Miranda and Joy having drinks. And Miranda is looking at Joy like something real is happening,
Yes,
or
and-
something smart has happened.
Well, and you see they're equally yoked, as the expression goes. These are two women who belong together.
They're
complementary of
they
each other,
match
and they match.
their energy. And
Like-minded.
I will say, when we filmed it, they were just chattering away as if they were
Yeah.
the oldest but best new friends with each other. It was
Whoever
was
we wanted
quite
to,
entertaining.
well
to
matched.
give Miranda to end the season with, it had to be an equal or someone who's even got information she doesn't have.
Yes.
Exactly.
And that's what you get, like, oh, I'm punching
A
up at
sparring
Miranda.
partner.
Yeah. And then, Naya and Toussaint come home, and we talked a lot about, we don't want them to be in bed. We don't want to start,
We've
because
seen-
Naya was
yeah,
not in bed
she's
in
had
the
a
first
lot of
montage.
sex, yeah.
And we wanted it to be something more. So
No, and it was-
he says, do you have anything to eat? And she says, we ate. And he goes, well, I didn't, because of course the chefs never eat. And she says, come on in. And that's her. We know she cooks. This is her inviting him into her kitchen.
And it's much more intimate than it would be, since we've seen her have
Sure.
quite a bit of sex.
And we see Seema and Ravi post-sex, both smoking,
And
sitting in a
talking. I
bed
love
and
that.
talking, and he's looking
Yeah.
at his phone, and she takes it away, and then he picks it up again, and she's still talking, and they're
And
having
they're
a
laughing.
conversation and
Yeah.
laughing. And then we see Carrie and Aiden, and it's the most open I've ever
yeah, and they're
seen
not
those two
sad.
actors.
I was surprised, and
They're
I really
naked
liked
and
they were,
they're open, and it's fun. And that's the thing that's so interesting about how they played it. It's like this, they're deeply connected, but it's not like, I'm holding on to you because
Yeah,
I'll
it's
never
not-
see
it's
you
the
again.
last
night I'll ever
tragic.
see you.
No,
Yeah.
and all these montages, we wanted to move past one moment and show many moments, like this whole last night in that bed that they've never slept in. They're just there with each other. And you see him laughing, you see him, she's on top of him at one point, and he's just looking into her face, and then they fall asleep, and they're in the nook, if you remember the old Sex and the City. Carrie, Aiden, she used to
Yeah.
sleep in his nook, but now she's on her own, and he's pulling up next to her. And the thing that is, this is another surprise, because this is where the cut departs from where I wrote in the script, because I ended with Carrie and Aiden, you would think.
right.
And then Michael chose to put Herbert and LTW last,
I love
which is
that.
like such a surprise, but it's profound how far up we've moved them.
No, they're a
Yeah.
central couple now, and they're very tender together.
Yeah, and I
it's-
loved that they obviously, we've established they have this very great active sex life together, but that this was not a moment that we needed to see that. It
This
was
is just sleeping.
intimacy.
Yeah.
And
Through the
They're
night, different
comfortable
positions,
together. They're safe
touching
with each other.
and
Yeah.
just moving together in different
They're in
ways, but they're
unison.
in the same bed, in the same emotional
Space.
state. It's very delicate and very beautiful. And then you end in the montage of Carrie and Aiden walking to the door. So she says, no matter what happens, this, and she points to the new apartment, which is very important for us to claim that new apartment. And then she points to them, and this was not a mistake, echoing what he said
Yeah.
about their apartment. They both, in the last episode, how they both made mistakes. And he says, and it's the most clean, effortless performance. Nothing bad's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then she stands at that window
with Shu.
with Shu.
and it's quite happy. She's
it's
complete in herself. You know, it's not as if like her other half is leaving.
Right.
It's
There's hope.
you feel Carrie
what you
Bradshaw's going
all
to be
think
okay.
about what happened and what you all think that what their individual states are. We wanted to end with that moment of believing the truth of they've made this connection and it's going to stay there. And then she closes the window and Seema calls and says, I've got us. We're not going to, he's gone.
Yeah.
Ravi's gone. Aiden's gone.
And
We're
this
not
is
going to,
a
we're
way
going to,
to
we're not going
end
to, we're not going to, we're going to
on
sit
a
in this
high
hot
note.
city. We're going to go to a beach. And we cut to them. And Carrie says, I'm not going to the Hamptons. They're in Greece. The glamour. I knew it was going to end before anything. That Carrie and Seema would be sitting on a beach in Greece looking out at the horizon. That it would not end with Carrie and Aiden.
And I'm so glad. I knew that, and then I
Me
forgot it
too.
when we were shooting that day. And then you reminded me, this isn't the end. It's like, oh, right. Thank
And
God.
they
Right, it
ask
always-
the dramatic question, will they come back? And then they say, well, there'll always be more. Men, no cocktails.
And even in our only little tip to you, the audience, the people who are watching this and wondering what we're thinking, there's a little tiny thread of what we're thinking at the end, which is Seema says, well, we ran at love. Where did it get us? Greece. And then she goes, I'm waiting 5 months and you're waiting 5 years. And Carrie says, well, I may get some time off for good behavior. Like, you would only say that if you already are going, it's not going to be 5 years. You know, she's very cute, but then she does move on to say there'll be others.
Yeah,
And then she
it's
ends.
open.
And, you know, we try to sometimes end with these poetic lines. And just like that, well, first of all, the very first one was in Just Like That, Big died. You can't get more poetic than that. Or I repurposed my pain this season. And when I tried to write something poetic for this, it was just too forced. So I thought, what's the most poetic thing Carrie Bradshaw can do? She orders 2 more drinks. This is Just Like That. I ordered 2 more Cosmopolitans. We've loved writing this season, all of us. We've loved, it's our personal joy to write these characters because they all have parts of us in them and parts of our friends, as you've heard, and parts of our lovers and husbands
And our family,
wives. And it's,
whether they like it or not.
Children.
We really do
Occasionally.
love our children, all of us.
Really.
the fact
For
of the
the
matter
record.
is we've done a little journey of these characters and hopefully you've known the original ones very long, so you've enjoyed the new sides we've done. We've taken some big risks with bringing people back that we knew we wanted to, and we hopefully you like our new people more
And
because
hopefully
you know them.
more.
It's been a really thrilling show to write this season, and I hope that you enjoyed us talking about us writing it this season. And just like that, it is the end of episode 11 and the season of this podcast. Thanks, Julie, Elisa, Susan, and Samantha for joining me today. And thank all of you listeners for joining us in the writer's room.
And just like that, The Writer's Room is produced by Neon Hum Media for Max. At Neon Hum, Sharon Morris is the executive producer. Joanna Clay is the lead producer. Sammy Allison is our head of production. Zoe Culkin is our associate producer. Sam Baer is our engineer. That's it for the show. Thank you for listening.